Imagine this. In the shadowy halls of Blackwood Manor, a wealthy tycoon is found stabbed in his locked study, a half-smoked cigar still burning, a mysterious pearl on his desk, and traces of mud leading nowhere. Was it his unhappy wife, hiding secrets of betrayal to his ambitious business partner, entangled in shady deals? Or a trusted servant with a hidden agenda? As Hercule Poirot arrives, his little grey cells uncover a web of lies, smuggling, and deadly deceit that could crumble an empire. What single trace will unravel it all? Stay tuned for Poirot's one trace that crumbled a crime network. A classic mystery of suspense, twists, and shocking revelations that will keep you guessing until the very end. Chapter 1. The invitation to Blackwood Manor have often reflected. In the years since my association with Hercule Poirot began, on how the most tranquil of settings can harbor the seeds of profound disturbance. It was in the autumn of 1928. A season when the leaves of England turned to gold and crimson, that I received an invitation which would plunge me into one of the most perplexing affairs of my career. The missive came from Sir Reginald Ashcroft, a man of considerable wealth and influence, whose name was synonymous with the vast shipping empire that bore his family's crest. Blackwood Manor, his ancestral estate nestled in the rolling hills of Devonshire, was to be the venue for a weekend gathering of select guests, a small party. The invitation read, to discuss matters of mutual interest, with ample time for leisure amid the countryside's charms. I must confess, I was somewhat surprised to be included. My acquaintance with Sir Reginald was superficial at best, forged during a brief encounter at a London club, where we had exchanged pleasantries over brandy and cigars. He was a robust fellow in his late 50s, with a ruddy complexion that spoke of outdoor pursuits and a hearty laugh that masked, I suspected, a sharper intellect than he cared to reveal. His wife, Lady Evelyn Ashcroft, was a vision of refined elegance, some 15 years his junior, with porcelain skin and eyes that held a perpetual hint of melancholy. Rumors in society circles whispered of her dissatisfaction with provincial life, but such gossip is often the idle fancy of the bored. The invitation extended to my dear friend Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective whose reputation for unraveling the knottiest of enigmas had spread far beyond the confines of Baker Street. Poirot, ever the connoisseur of human nature, had accepted with alacrity. "Ah, Hastings," he had said, his green eyes twinkling with that peculiar gleam that betokened intrigue. "One does not refuse an invitation from a man like Sir Reginald. There is always, in such gatherings, the possibility of interest." He adjusted his immaculate moustache with a precise flick of his fingers, a gesture as familiar to me as my own reflection. We arrived at Blackwood Manor on a crisp Friday afternoon, the train from Paddington having deposited us at the nearby station, where a chauffeured Rolls-Royce awaited. The drive through the winding lanes, flanked by ancient oaks and hedgerows ablaze with autumnal hues, was a balm to the soul after the clamour of the city. The manor itself emerged like a sentinel from the mist-shrouded grounds, a sprawling edifice of grey stone, its Tudor architecture evoking centuries of history. Ivy clung to the walls, and the tall chimneys puffed gentle smoke into the sky, promising warmth within. Upon alighting, we were greeted by the butler, a stoic figure named Jenkins, whose lined face and impeccable uniform suggested long service to the Ashcroft family. "Welcome, Captain Hastings, Monsieur Poirot," he intoned with a bow. "Sir Reginald is expecting you in the drawing-room." The interior of Blackwood Manor was a testament to opulence tempered by tradition. Polished oak panels lined the halls, adorned with portraits of stern ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow our progress. We were ushered into the drawing-room, a spacious chamber dominated by a roaring fireplace and furnished with deep leather armchairs. A grand piano stood in one corner, its lid closed, and shelves groaned under the weight of leather-bound volumes. Sir Reginald rose to greet us, his hand extended in a firm grip. "Hastings, old chap, and Monsieur Poirot, delighted you could make it. Come, warm yourselves by the fire. Tea will be served shortly." Beside him sat Lady Evelyn, her slender fingers toying with a string of pearls at her throat. She offered a polite smile, though her eyes darted briefly to the window, as if seeking escape from the confines of the room. "We are so pleased to have you both," she murmured, her voice soft and cultured. The other guests were already assembled, forming a circle that exuded the superficial harmony of polite society. There was Mr. Victor Langford, Sir Reginald's business partner in the Ashcroft Shipping Company, a tall, angular man with sharp features and a perpetual air of calculation. His suit was tailored to perfection, but his hands betrayed a nervous habit of drumming on the armrest. Beside him lounged Miss Clara Beaumont, Lady Evelyn's niece, a vivacious young woman in her early 20s with bobbed hair and a laugh that tinkled like crystal. She was visiting from London, where she pursued a career in the theatre, or so she claimed with a dramatic flourish. Then there was Dr. Elias Thorne, the family physician, a portly gentleman with spectacles perched on the end of his nose and a manner that combined professional detachment with avuncular warmth. He had been summoned, it seemed, not merely as a guest, but to attend to Sir Reginald's occasional bouts of indigestion, a minor ailment, he assured us, nothing more. Completing the party was Mrs. Lydia Hargrove, Sir Reginald's widowed sister, a formidable woman of middle age whose black attire and stern expression suggested a life marked by loss and resilience. She spoke little, but her gaze was keen, missing nothing. As tea was served, delicate sandwiches, scones with clotted cream, and a selection of cakes arranged on silver tiers, the conversation flowed with the ease of those accustomed to such occasions. Sir Reginald expounded on the challenges of the shipping trade, lamenting the economic uncertainties of the post-war years. "The world is changing, gentlemen," he boomed, "but Ashcroft Shipping endures. We've weathered storms before, literal and figurative." Langford nodded in agreement, though I noted a flicker of tension in his eyes. "Indeed, Reginald, our latest venture promises great returns, provided all goes smoothly," Lady Evelyn interjected, with a light comment on the beauty of the gardens, steering the talk to safer waters. Miss Beaumont regaled us with tales of the London stage, her enthusiasm infectious. Dr. Thorne shared anecdotes from his practice, careful to avoid anything indelicate, while Mrs. Hargrove observed in silence, her teacup balanced with precision. Poirot, seated beside me, sipped his Tisner herbal infusion he had requested in lieu of tea and listened with that quiet intensity which I knew so well. His little grey cells, as he fondly called them, were doubtless at work, cataloguing every nuance of voice and gesture. "It is a charming assembly, mon ami," he whispered to me during a lull. "But observe the politeness. It is like the surface of a pond. One wonders what lies beneath." I chuckled softly, dismissing his words as the product of an overactive imagination. How could I know, in that moment of conviviality, that the serenity of Blackwood Manor was but a fragile veneer? The air held no hint of the storm to come, no whisper of the tragedy that would shatter the peace and draw us all into a web of deceit and danger. As evening descended, the guests retired to dress for dinner. The manor lamps were lit, casting golden pools of light against the gathering dusk. In my room, a comfortable chamber overlooking the lawns, I unpacked my valise and pondered the week-end ahead. Little did I suspect that by morning the quiet setting would be forever altered, and Hercule Poirot's unparalleled mind would be called upon to pierce the veil of mystery. Dinner that night was a sumptuous affair, served in the dining room under the glow of crystal chandeliers, roast pheasant, accompanied by vegetables from the estate's gardens, and a fine claret from Sir Reginald's cellar. Conversation turned to lighter topics: travel, literature, the latest scandals in the newspapers. Yet, beneath the laughter and clink of glasses, I sensed undercurrents, a sharp exchange between Sir Reginald and Langford over business matters, quickly smoothed over. Lady Evelyn's distracted gaze, Miss Beaumont's flirtatious banter with Dr. Thorne, who blushed like a schoolboy, Poirot, ever observant, engaged each in turn with his disarming charm. "Madam Hargrove," he said at one point, "you have the air of one who has seen much of the world's sorrows. It is the lot of the strong." Next pause, she regarded him coolly. "One endures, Monsieur Poirot. That is all." As the meal concluded with port and cheese, Sir Reginald proposed a toast to friendship and prosperity. He declared, raising his glass. The response was hearty, but as I glanced around the table, I could not shake Poirot's earlier words. The pond's surface rippled ever so slightly, retiring to the library for cigars and brandy. The men discussed politics while the ladies withdrew to the drawing-room. It was nearing midnight when we all sought our beds, the house settling into silence, broken only by the hoot of an owl in the distant woods. That night, as I drifted into sleep, I dreamed of calm seas and hidden depths. How prophetic those dreams would prove, only the morrow would reveal. Word count 1,248. Chapter 2. The shadow of death morning dawned with a deceptive serenity over Blackwood Manor. The sun filtered through the heavy drapes of my room, casting dappled patterns on the polished floorboards. I rose early, as was my habit, and after a brisk shave and dressing in my tweeds, I descended to the breakfast room, expecting the usual fare of kedgeree and toast. The house was quiet, save for the distant clatter of servants preparing the day's repast. I anticipated a pleasant meal, perhaps enlivened by Poirot's commentary on the peculiarities of English breakfast customs, which he often found excessive, yet curiously endearing. The breakfast room, with its long mahogany table and tall windows overlooking the rose garden, was empty when I arrived. Jenkins, the butler, was arranging silverware with the precision of a military drill. "Good morning, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice as measured as ever. "The others will be down shortly, I expect. Sir Reginald prefers a late start on Saturdays." I nodded, helping myself to coffee from a silver urn. "And Monsieur Poirot, has he been down yet?" "Not yet, sir. He requested his tisane be brought to his room at 8 o'clock sharp. A most particular gentleman, if I may say so." I smiled. Poirot's particularity was legendary. As I sipped my coffee, I gazed out at the garden, where dew sparkled on the petals like scattered diamonds. The tranquility was shattered, however, by a sudden commotion from the holler cry, sharp and piercing, followed by the rapid patter of footsteps. Jenkins stiffened, his hand pausing mid-polish. "What in heaven's name?" he muttered, striding toward the door. I followed, my heart quickening with an instinctive sense of foreboding. We found Mrs. Hargrove in the entrance hall, her face ashen, her hands clutching the banister of the grand staircase. "It's Reginald," she gasped, her voice trembling in a way that belied her usual composure. He's dead." The words struck like a blow. I glanced at Jenkins, whose professional mask faltered for a moment, revealing shock. "Where is he, madam?" I asked, stepping forward. "In his study," she replied, pointing toward a corridor leading off the hall. "I went to speak with him about a family matter. The door was ajar, and I found him. Oh, it's too dreadful." Without waiting for further explanation, I hurried down the corridor, Jenkins at my heels. The study door stood slightly open, as Mrs. Hargrove had described. I pushed it wider and stepped inside, bracing myself for what I might find. Sir Reginald Ashcroft lay slumped across his desk, his head resting on a blotter stained with ink and something darker. His eyes were open, staring blankly, and his face bore an expression of frozen surprise. A letter opener, its silver handle gleaming in the morning light, protruded from his chest. Blood had pooled beneath him, soaking into the rich Persian rug. The room smelled faintly of tobacco and the metallic tang of blood. I approached cautiously, checking for signs of life, though I knew it was futile. His wrist was cold, his pulse absent. "He's gone," I murmured, stepping back. Jenkins, standing in the doorway, crossed himself, his lips moving in a silent prayer. "We must fetch the others," I said, my mind racing. "And Poirot'll know what to do." Jenkins nodded and departed to summon the household. I remained, taking in the scene with a soldier's eye for detail, though I knew better than to touch anything. The study was a masculine sanctuary, lined with bookshelves and adorned with nautical artifacts: a model schooner, a brass sextant, a map of trade routes pinned to the wall. The desk was cluttered with papers, a half-smoked cigar in an ashtray, and a glass of brandy. Barely touched, a clock on the mantel ticked steadily, marking the time at 8:30. Moments later, the household converged. Lady Evelyn entered. First, her face pale as she stifled a scream at the sight of her husband. "Reginald," she cried, clutching the door frame for support. Miss Clara Beaumont followed, her eyes wide with horror, while Dr. Thorne pushed past, his medical instincts overriding shock. He knelt beside the body, confirming what I already knew. "Stabbed through the heart," he said grimly. "Dead. For several hours, I'd wager. Rigor is setting in." Mr. Langford appeared next, his sharp features drawn tight. "Good God," he muttered, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Who could have done this?" Mrs. Hargrove, now composed but still pale, stood near the window, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I found him just as he is," she said quietly. "I didn't touch anything." It was then that Poirot entered, his small, neat figure a stark contrast to the chaos of the scene. He wore a dressing gown of deep burgundy, his hair impeccably combed, his mustache as pristine as ever. His green eyes swept the room, taking in every detail with that uncanny precision I had come to admire. "Mon Dieu," he said softly, his voice carrying a note of profound regret. "A tragedy most foul. Hastings, mon ami, what have we stumbled upon?" I recounted Mrs. Hargrove's discovery and my own observations, keeping my voice steady despite the grim circumstances. Poirot listened, his head tilted slightly, his fingers steepled before him. "And no one heard anything in the night?" he asked, his gaze shifting to the assembled group. Heads shook in unison. The house was silent. Lady Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I retired early after the library." Reginald said he had work to finish here. Poirot nodded, stepping closer to the body. He examined the letter opener without touching it, noting its ornate handle and the precision of the wound. "A single thrust, direct and forceful," he murmured. "The weapon was close at hand. An opportunity seized, perhaps." He moved to the desk, his eyes scanning the papers. "These documents business correspondence, I presume, Monsieur Langford. You are familiar with Sir Reginald's affairs?" Langford nodded, his expression guarded. "Yes. We were working on a new contract with a Dutch firm. Nothing out of the ordinary. Everything in a murder is out of the ordinary," Poirot replied, his tone mild but firm. He turned to Jenkins. "The local police must be informed, and no one is to leave the manor until they arrive. This room must remain untouched." Jenkins bowed. "At once, Monsieur Poirot." As the butler departed, Poirot addressed the group. "Mesdames et messieurs, a crime has been committed under this roof. Hercule Poirot will assist the authorities, but I must have your cooperation. Each of you will recount your movements last night. Every detail, however small, is of consequence." There was a murmur of assent, though I detected unease in their faces. Lady Evelyn's hands trembled slightly, and Miss Beaumont clung to her aunt's arm. Dr. Thorne adjusted his spectacles, his brow furrowed, while Langford's fingers resumed their nervous drumming. Mrs. Hargrove alone seemed unmoved, her eyes meeting Poirot's with a steady intensity. The police arrived within the hour. Local inspector named Grayson A stout man with a no-nonsense demeanour, accompanied by a young constable. Grayson surveyed the scene, took statements, and confirmed Poirot's directive to seal the study. "I've heard of you, Monsieur Poirot," he said, a touch of skepticism in his tone. "If you're as good as they say, I'll welcome your insights. But this looks like a straightforward case. That letter opener's got someone's prints on it." "Mark my words," Poirot smiled faintly. "The obvious, Inspector, is often the least reliable. We shall see what the little grey cells uncover." As the morning wore on, the household was questioned in the drawing-room. Each recounted their movements after dinner. Lady Evelyn had retired at 10, claiming a headache. Miss Beaumont had lingered in the drawing-room, practicing a monologue until 11. Dr. Thorne had joined the men for brandy before retiring at 10:30. Langford and Sir Reginald had discussed business in the library until nearly midnight. Parting on amicable terms, Mrs. Hargrove had gone to her room at 10:30. Reading until sleep claimed her. All claimed to have heard nothing unusual during the night. Poirot listened, his expression unreadable, occasionally jotting notes in a small leather-bound book. I knew that his mind was already sifting through the alibis, searching for the inconsistencies that would betray the truth. As the interviews concluded, Poirot drew me aside. "Hastings, what do you make of this tragedy?" I frowned, considering. "It's ghastly, Poirot. A man like Sir Reginald, stabbed in his own study, it's unthinkable. Perhaps a burglar. Disturbed in the act." Poirot shook his head. "Non. Mon ami, a burglar does not use a letter opener from the victim's desk. This was personal, deliberate. The killer is among us, and already the lies begin to form." I shivered, glancing at the sombre faces around us. The peace of Blackwood Manor was shattered, and I knew that only Poirot's relentless logic could restore order to this chaos. Chapter 3. The methodical observer of atmosphere in Blackwood Manor had transformed irrevocably by midday. The once welcoming halls now heavy with the pall of suspicion and grief. Inspector Grayson, having secured the study and dispatched his constable to summon the coroner, established a makeshift headquarters in the library. Bookshelves loomed like silent witnesses, and the air carried the faint scent of aged leather and cigar smoke from the previous evenings. Gathering, Poirot, with his characteristic poise, had assumed a role that was unofficial yet undeniably authoritative, though he had been present as a guest. His arrival upon the scene of the crime felt almost providential, as if fate had conspired to place the great detective amid this nest of intrigue. I watched as Poirot paced the library with measured steps, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the parquet floor. He had changed into one of his immaculate suits of dark wool with a subtle pinstripe, and his mustache was waxed to perfection, a testament to his unyielding insistence on order even in the face of disorder. "Hastings," he said, pausing before a window that overlooked the manicured lawns. "The human mind. It is a marvelous instrument, but so prone to deception. We must proceed with method, with precision. No stone unturned, no assumption unchallenged." Inspector Grayson, seated at a writing desk with a notebook open before him, glanced up with a mixture of irritation and curiosity, Method is all well and good, Monsieur Poirot, but facts are facts. Sir Reginald was last seen alive by Mr. Langford at midnight. The study door was locked from the inside. Jenkins confirms he heard the bolt slide as Sir Reginald bid good night. No windows forced, no secret passages in this old pile. I'll wager whoever did this must have been let in by the victim himself. Poirot's eyes sparkled with that familiar gleam. Ah, Inspector, you speak of facts, but facts without interpretation are like puzzle pieces scattered on the floor. Why was the door ajar this morning, as Madame Hargrove found it? And the bolt, did anyone verify it was engaged throughout the night? Grayson frowned, flipping through his notes. No one claims to have checked, but the household was asleep. Precisely, Poirot replied, tapping his temple. The little grey cells. They whisper that we must reconstruct the timeline with exactitude. Let us begin with the interviews more deeply this time. Hastings, you will assist me. Your military precision will be invaluable. We commenced in the drawing room, where the suspects, though I hesitated to label them as such, were assembled under the watchful eye of the constable. The room, with its chintz sofas and vases of late-blooming roses, seemed incongruously cheerful against the sombre mood. Lady Evelyn sat rigidly, a handkerchief clutched in her lap, her eyes red-rimmed from restrained tears. Beside her, Miss Clara Beaumont fidgeted with a bracelet, her theatrical poise cracking under the strain. Dr. Thorne paced near the fireplace, his spectacles fogging slightly from the heat, while Mr. Langford stood by the window, staring out, as if seeking answers in the distant hills. Mrs. Hargrove occupied an armchair, her expression inscrutable, and Jenkins hovered discreetly in the background, ready to serve if needed. Poirot began with Lady Evelyn, his voice gentle yet probing. Madam Ashcroft, you retired at 10 o'clock with a headache. Did you take any remedy? Perhaps a powder from Dr. Thorne? She nodded faintly. Yes, he gave me a sedative earlier in the evening. I slept soundly until morning. And your roommate is adjacent to Sir Reginald's study, is it not? The Manor plans, which Jenkins has kindly provided, show it so. Poirot produced a hastily sketched map from his pocket, courtesy of the butler. Lady Evelyn hesitated, her fingers twisting the handkerchief. Yes, but the walls are thick. I heard nothing. Poirot inclined his head. Of course. And your relations with your husband, they were harmonious? A flush crept into her cheeks. As harmonious as any marriage of long standing. Reginald was devoted to his business, but we understood each other. I noted the slight pause, wondering if Poirot had caught it as well. He had, of course. Nothing escaped him. Turning to Miss Beaumont, Poirot's tone softened further. Mademoiselle, you practiced your lines in this very room until 11. A monologue from Shakespeare, perhaps, or something more modern. She brightened momentarily, then dimmed. From the importance of being earnest, Lady Bracknell's part, I find Wilde's wit distracting in trying times. And did anyone join you? Or did you venture elsewhere in the house? No, I was alone. Though I did hear footsteps in the hall around 10:30, probably Aunt Lydia retiring. Mrs. Hargrove interjected coolly. Indeed, that was me. I bid good night to Clara before going upstairs. Poirot nodded, making a note. Madam Hargrove. You read in your room until sleep came. What book, if I may inquire? A volume of essays by Emerson. Reginald's library is well stocked. And your reason for seeking Sir Reginald this morning? A family matter, you said. Her gaze met his steadily. Financial. Reginald managed my late husband's investments. I wished to discuss a discrepancy in the accounts. Langford shifted uncomfortably at this, drawing Poirot's attention. Monsieur Langford, you were the last to see Sir Reginald alive. Your discussion in the library, was it amicable, as you claimed? Langford's eyes narrowed. Entirely. We reviewed the Dutch contract profitable for the company, I assure you. Reginald was in good spirits. Yet Madam Hargrove mentions discrepancies. Were there troubles in the business? A tense silence fell. Langford cleared his throat. Minor irregularities, nothing more. Reginald was addressing them. Dr. Thorne spoke up, his voice steady. If I may, Monsieur Poirot, as the family doctor, I can vouch for Sir Reginald's health. No ailments that would suggest suicide. If that's what you're implying, Poirot smiled enigmatically. Suicide? None, doctor. The wound is not self-inflicted, the angle is wrong, and the force required. But your sedative for Lady Evelyn, did you dispense others last night? Thorne shook his head. Only to her, though Sir Reginald complained of indigestion after dinner. I advised bicarbonate, but he preferred brandy. Jenkins, when questioned, confirmed the household's movements, adding that he had locked the external doors at midnight and heard nothing untoward. During his final rounds, as the interviews progressed, Poirot's questions delved deeper, uncovering subtle tensions. Lady Evelyn admitted to occasional quarrels with her husband over her desire for more time in London society. Miss Beaumont revealed a youthful infatuation with Langford, dismissed as harmless flirtation. Langford confessed to financial pressures, hinting at Sir Reginald's conservative approach stifling expansion. Mrs. Hargrove spoke of a long-standing feud over inheritance. Her husband's share diminished by Reginald's decisions. Even Dr. Thorne admitted to a professional disagreement with Sir Reginald regarding a charitable endowment. Throughout, Poirot observed not just words, but gestures, the flicker of an eyelid, the clench of a fist, the averted gaze. Psychology, Hastings, he murmured to Mead during a brief pause. It is the key. Each harbors a secret, a motive perhaps. But motive alone does not make a murderer. Inspector Grayson, joining us midway, pressed for fingerprints on the letter opener. We'll have results from the lab by tomorrow, he said gruffly. Likely smudged, but if there's a clear print. Poirot waved a hand dismissively. Fingerprints may confirm, but they do not reveal the why, the how of the locked door. By afternoon, the coroner arrived, confirming death by stabbing between midnight and 2 a.m. The body was removed, leaving the study sealed. Poirot requested permission to examine it further, which Grayson granted reluctantly. Alone in the study with me, Poirot moved like a cat, his eyes darting. He examined the desk papers, a contract with annotations in Sir Reginald's hand. A ledger showing discrepancies indeed. See here, Hastings, he said, pointing to a figure. Funds transferred to an unnamed account. Embezzlement, perhaps? He Inspected the door lock sturdy, no signs of tampering. The windows were latched from inside. No escape but the door. He mused, yet no one heard it open or close. A small detail caught his eye, a trace of mud on the rug near the desk, dried and flaked. From the garden, but the night was dry. Intriguing. As evening approached, the household dined sparsely, conversation stilted, Poirot retired early. But I knew his mind churned. Tomorrow, mon ami, he said, we dig deeper. The arrival of truth is imminent. I lay awake that night, the Manor's creaks amplified by imagination. Poirot's presence, though already established, felt like a beacon in the gathering storm of secrets. Chapter 4. The veil of Alibis the following day brought a chill wind to Blackwood Manor, rattling the panes and mirroring the unease that had settled over its inhabitants like a shroud. Inspector Grayson had returned with reinforcements, a sergeant, and a fingerprint expert from the county force intent on methodically dissecting the evidence. The study remained sealed, its door guarded by the young constable, while the rest of the house pulsed with subdued activity. Servants moved like shadows, whispering in corners, and the guests confined themselves to the common rooms, avoiding one another's eyes as if guilt were contagious. Poirot, undeterred by the gloom, had risen at dawn, partaking of his habitual chocolate and croissants in the breakfast room. I joined him there, finding him poring over his notebook, his pencil darting across the pages with swift, precise strokes. "Ah, Hastings," he greeted me, his voice vibrant despite the hour. "You have slept well." "No, I see the circles under your eyes. The mind, it races in the night." "None? But today we advance. The questions they must be asked with care, like peeling the layers of an onion. Each alibi, each motive, we shall examine." Inspector Grayson arrived shortly after, his face set in determined lines. "We've dusted the letter opener," he announced, accepting a cup of coffee from Jenkins. "Prints are smudged, as I feared, but there's a partial one that matches Sir Reginald's own. The killer must have worn gloves or wiped it clean." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Gloves, yes. That suggests premeditation, or perhaps a handkerchief seized in the moment. And the mud on the rug. Have your men analyzed it?" Grayson grunted. "Common. Garden soil, nothing distinctive. Could have been tracked in by anyone, or by no one." Poirot murmured enigmatically, "Come, Inspector. Let us proceed with the deeper interrogations. Separately, if you please. The group dynamic, it conceals much." We began in the morning room, a cozy space with floral wallpaper and a view of the herb garden. Poirot had arranged for each person to be summoned in turn, with me acting as note-taker, and Grayson observing from a corner armchair. The method was Poirot's hallmark. Calm, conversational, yet relentlessly probing, drawing out details that seemed innocuous but often proved pivotal. First came Lady Evelyn, her composure fragile as fine china. She wore a simple grey dress, her pearls absent, as if in mourning already. "Madam," Poirot began, gesturing to a seat, "let us speak of your marriage." Sir Reginald was a man of business, devoted to his ships and ledgers. Did this devotion leave room for other affections?" Her eyes widened slightly. "What are you implying, Monsieur Poirot?" "Nothing untoward, madam. But, in my experience, a wife knows her husband's heart. Were there rivals for his time, perhaps in London, where you wished to spend more days?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. Reginald was faithful, but distant lately. The business troubles weighed on him. He mentioned arguments with Victor Mr. Langford over risky investments. "And these troubles, did they involve the discrepancies Madame Hargrove mentioned?" "I know little of the finances. Reginald handled everything." Her voice faltered. "But yes, there were heated words. I overheard them in the library 2 nights ago." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes keen. "The exact words, if you recall, something about embezzlement and ruining the family name. Victor denied it, of course." Grayson jotted this down, his brow furrowing. I could see the seeds of suspicion taking root. Langford as the obvious culprit. Next was Miss Clara Beaumont, her youthful energy subdued, though her eyes sparkled with a mix of fear and excitement, as if she were playing a role in one of her theatrical productions. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said warmly, "you are an observer of human drama, none on the stage. One learns to read expressions, gestures. What did you observe among this company?" She tilted her head, considering. Uncle Reginald seemed tense, especially with Mr. Langford and Aunt Evelyn. She's been unhappy for months. I tried to cheer her with stories from London, but she was distracted. And your own movements last night practicing until 11. Did you see anyone after that? I passed Dr. Thorne in the hall as I went up. He was carrying his medical bag, heading toward the study. Said he was checking on Uncle's indigestion. Poirot's mustache twitched. Interesting. And your feelings toward your uncle. He supported your theatrical ambitions. Perhaps. Clara flushed. He was kind, but strict. Thought the stage unsuitable for a lady. We argued about it yesterday afternoon. A motive. However, slight disinheritance. Perhaps. Poirot noted it without comment. Dr. Thorne followed, his portly frame sinking into the chair with a sigh. "Doctor," Poirot inquired, "you dispensed a sedative to Lady Evelyn. And Sir Reginald's indigestion, did you visit him after midnight?" Thorne adjusted his spectacles. "No, I offered earlier, but he declined. I retired at 10:30, as I said. But Mademoiselle Beaumont saw you with your bag near the study." Thorne paused. "Ah, yes. I fetched a book from the library on digestive ailments. The bag was with me. Habit, you know." Poirot smiled. "Of course. And as the family physician, you are privy to secrets. Sir Reginald's health, was there anything amiss beyond indigestion? Perhaps worries that affected his heart." "His heart was sound, physically. But stress, yes. He confided in me about business woes. Feared ruin if the Dutch deal fell through. And who stood to gain from that ruin?" Thorne shifted uncomfortably. Langford pushed for it. Risky, but potentially lucrative. Mr. Langford was next, his angular face taut with strain. "Monsieur," Poirot said, "you were partners with Sir Reginald. Close, like brothers. None, yet brothers quarrel." Langford's hands clenched. "We disagreed on strategy. He was cautious. I advocated expansion. But murder? Absurd. The ledger shows transfers. 2 unnamed accounts. Your doing? Langford paled. No. Reginald managed the books. If there were irregularities, perhaps he was hiding losses. A deflection clever. But Poirot pressed. And your alibi alone in your room after midnight. No one to confirm, none. But I had no reason to kill him. His death jeopardizes everything. Mrs. Hargrove entered last, her black attire lending her an air of solemn authority. Madam, Poirot began, your financial discussion this morning, it was urgent. She nodded curtly. My investments have dwindled. Reginald promised returns, but the statements showed losses. I suspected mismanagement or worse. Embezzlement, possibly. He denied it when I confronted him last week. And last night did you speak again? No. I read. As I said, but I heard a door creak around 1 a.m. from my room above the study. Poirot's eyes sharpened. A creak, like the study door, perhaps, or the wind. Jenkins, though not a suspect, was questioned briefly. He reiterated locking the house, hearing nothing unusual. As the interrogations concluded, Poirot conferred with Grayson and me in the library. See, my friends, alibis interlock, yet cracks appear. The doctor near the study, the arguments over money, the overheard accusations, and the mud. Let us examine the garden. We ventured outside, the wind whipping our coats. Poirot inspected the paths, finding similar soil near a side door. Tracked in, perhaps. But by whom? Grayson scoffed. Langford's the one. Motive, opportunity. Poirot chuckled. The obvious suspect. Inspector Parr. But Hercule Poirot suspects the obvious is a veil. There is more a network, perhaps, beyond this manor. I puzzled over his words. A crime network? The shipping company hinted at larger stakes smuggling, fraud, as luncheon approached. Tension simmered. Poirot's questions had stirred the pot, and I sensed the first red herrings emerging, leading us astray before the truth surfaced. Chapter 5. The red herrings be the afternoon of the second day. Blackwood Manor seemed to shrink under the weight of its secrets, the grand rooms feeling more like a stage, where each player masked their true intentions. The initial shock of Sir Reginald Ashcroft's murder had given way to a simmering unease, as if the very walls whispered of hidden truths. Inspector Grayson, fortified by a hearty luncheon of cold meats and pickles, was growing impatient, his focus narrowing on Victor Langford as the prime suspect. The ledger discrepancies, coupled with Langford's late-night meeting with Sir Reginald, painted him as the obvious culprit, a man driven by financial desperation to eliminate his cautious partner. Yet I knew, from long experience with Hercule Poirot, that the obvious was rarely the truth. Poirot himself remained serene, his small frame radiating a quiet confidence as he sipped his tisane in the library. Hastings, he said, his eyes gleaming with that familiar intensity. The red herring. It is a fish most cunning. It swims before our eyes, distracting from the deeper currents. We must not chase it blindly. I frowned, adjusting my tie. You mean Langford? Grayson's convinced he's our man. Precisement, Poirot replied, tapping his temple. The good inspector sees a motive and pounces, but motive is not proof. We must look beyond to the details that do not fit. The library, with its heavy curtains and shelves of dusty tomes, served as our base for the day's inquiries. Grayson had agreed to let Poirot continue his interrogations, albeit with a skeptical grunt, and the household was summoned once more. The air was thick with tension, each guest aware that suspicion hung over them like a storm cloud. I noted their postures, Lady Evelyn's rigid spine, Clara Beaumont's nervous fidgeting, Dr. Thorne's distracted air, Langford's defensive scowl, and Mrs. Hargrave's unyielding calm. Jenkins, ever the dutiful butler, stood by the door, his face a mask of professionalism. Poirot began with a new tack, focusing on the physical evidence. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, addressing the group, the study door was locked at midnight, yet found ajar at 8 this morning. No windows were forced, no secret passages exist. How, then, did the murderer enter and leave? Let us consider the timeline with care. He turned to Jenkins first. Monsieur Jenkins, you heard the bolt slide at midnight, as Sir Reginald retired. You checked the external doors thereafter? Yes, sir, Jenkins replied, his voice steady. All were locked, including the side door near the garden. I made my rounds at 12:15, then retired to my quarters. And the key to the study, where is it kept? Sir Reginald carried it on his person. Sir, there's only one, to my knowledge. Poirot nodded, making a note. And yet, the door was open. Curious, none, Grayson interjected, could have been left unlocked after Langford's meeting. Sir Reginald might have forgotten to bolt it. Langford bristled. Nonsense. I heard the bolt slide as I left. Reginald was particular about his privacy. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you, Monsieur Langford, departed the library at midnight. You saw no one in the corridor. No one, Langford insisted, though his fingers drummed on his near-nervous tic I'd come to recognize. Poirot shifted to Clara Beaumont, his tone gentle. Mademoiselle, you were in the drawing-room until 11. You heard footsteps at 10:30, Madame Hargreaves. You believe, but nothing later. No creak of a door, no sound from the study. Clara shook her head, her bobbed hair swaying. Nothing after that. I was engrossed in my lines. But she hesitated, glancing at Lady Evelyn. I did see Aunt Evelyn's light under her door when I went upstairs. It was still on at 11. Lady Evelyn's head snapped up. I told you. I took a sedative and slept. The light must have been left on by mistake. A mistake, Poirot echoed softly, his gaze lingering on her. Or perhaps you were awake. Reflecting on the evening's tensions, she flushed but said nothing, her handkerchief twisting in her hands. Dr. Thorne was next, his spectacles glinting as he leaned forward. Doctor, Poirot said, you were seen near the study with your medical bag at 11. You claim you fetched a book. Did you enter the study at all? No, Thorne said firmly. I passed by, nothing more. The door was closed, and Sir Reginald's indigestion. Did he request your presence after dinner? He mentioned it during brandy, but waved me off, said he'd manage with his usual remedy. Brandy, Poirot mused. The glass on his desk was barely touched. Strange for a man seeking relief. Mrs. Hargrove, when questioned, reiterated her story of hearing a creak at 1:00 a.m. It was faint, she said, her voice cool. I assumed it was the house settling. Old manors creak often. Poirot's questions seemed to circle, probing the same ground from different angles, and I sensed his strategy to unsettle, to provoke a slip. The red herrings were piling up Langford's motive, the unlocked door, the late-night light in Lady Evelyn's room, Grayson, growing restless, pressed for action. We've got enough to hold Langford for questioning, he said. The ledger, the argument motive and opportunity. Poirot raised a hand. Patience, Inspector. Let us examine the study once more. The physical clues they speak when words deceive. With Grayson's permission, we returned to the sealed study. The blood-stained blotter had been removed by the coroner, but the letter opener remained. Now bagged as evidence, Poirot knelt by the rug, inspecting the dried mud he'd noted earlier. Hastings, observe, he said, pointing to a faint smudge near the desk's leg. The mud is not uniform. Here, it is caked, as if stepped on repeatedly, yet elsewhere, it is scattered. I squinted, trying to follow his reasoning. Meaning what, Poirot? Meaning someone stood here, perhaps lingering. Not a casual step, but a deliberate pause. And the brandy glass. He moved to the desk, peering at the crystal tumbler, a smudge, not a fingerprint, but a trace of cloth, a handkerchief, perhaps. Used to wipe the glass? Grayson scoffed, or Sir Reginald cleaned it himself. None, Poirot said sharply. A man with indigestion does not clean his glass before drinking. No, this was wiped after by the killer, to remove evidence. I felt a chill. Poison. You think? Possible. But unlikely. The stab wound was fatal. But the glass, it tells a story. We must test its contents. Grayson agreed to send the glass to the lab. Though his skepticism was palpable, Poirot then turned to the desk papers, sifting through the contract and ledger. See here, Hastings, he said, pointing to a notation in the margin. VL to confirm transfer by 15th. VL Victor Langford. None, but the dated is 3 days hence. Why kill now? When the deal is unfinished, I shook my head. Baffled, perhaps to stop the deal, or to hide something else, Poirot said. The shipping company, it deals in more than goods, perhaps smuggling, fraud. As we left the study, Poirot paused by the side door to the garden, examining the lock. No scratches, he noted. Yet the mud suggests entry from outside, or a clever ruse to suggest it. Back in the library, Poirot confided in me. Hastings. The red herrings multiply. Langford is too convenient a suspect. Someone wishes us to focus on him, to miss the larger picture. But what is the picture? A single murder or a thread in a greater tapestry? Dinner that evening was a grim affair, the guests barely touching their food. Langford's scowl deepened as Grayson watched him closely. Clara whispered to Lady Evelyn, who seemed on the verge of collapse. Dr. Thorne offered her another sedative, which she refused. Mrs. Hargrove ate in silence, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk's dot as night fell. I felt the weight of it. Mystery pressing down. Poirot, however, was undaunted, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. "Tomorrow," he said, "we shall pull the threads apart. The red herrings will scatter, and the truth will begin to emerge." Chapter 6. A clue in detail. Third day at Blackwood Manor dawned with a heavy mist clinging to the Devonshire hills, shrouding the estate in an ethereal veil that seemed to mirror the opacity of the mystery before. The household moved with a mechanical precision, as if routine could ward off the spectre of murder. Breakfast was a subdued affair, with only the clink of cutlery breaking the silence. Inspector Grayson, fortified by a night's rest at the village inn, arrived early, his determination to pin the crime on Victor Langford undiminished. But Hercule Poirot, ever the contrarian, seemed more absorbed by minutiae than by the inspector's theories, his green eyes darting about as if the very air held secrets. After breakfast, Poirot requested a private audience with me in the conservatory, a glass-walled haven filled with ferns and the faint scent of damp earth. "Hastings," he said, adjusting his cufflinks with meticulous care, "we have reached a juncture most delicate. The red herrings, they swim in abundance. But now we seek the one detail, the single thread that unravels the tapestry. It is always in the small things, the overlooked, that truth hides." I nodded, though I confess I was still grappling with the web of alibis and motives. "Langford's still the focus, isn't he? The ledger. The argument it all points to him." Poirot's moustache twitched with amusement. "The ledger? Yes, it points. But to neatly, mon ami, let us return to the study. There is something, a detail that nags at the little grey cells." With Grayson's reluctant permission, we re-entered the sealed study, now stripped of its grimmest occupant, but still heavy with the memory of violence. The letter opener, bagged and removed, left an empty space on the desk, but the brandy glass, the ledger, and the scattered papers remained under police guard. Poirot moved with the precision of a watchmaker, his eyes scanning every surface. He paused at the desk, his fingers hovering over the ashtray where the half-smoked cigar rested. "Observe, Hastings," he said, lifting the ashtray with a handkerchief to avoid contamination. "This cigarette is not fully extinguished. The ash is uneven, as if it was set down in haste. Sir Reginald, a man of habit, would not leave a cigar to smoulder. Why, then, was it abandoned?" I frowned, peering at the cigar. Perhaps he was interrupted by the killer. Precisement. But interrupted how? The door was locked, the windows latched. Let us consider the sequence. He set the ashtray down and moved to the rug, where the trace of mud still lay. This mud, it is not merely garden soil. See the texture, the faint grit. I suspect it is from the path near the stables, not the garden proper. We must confirm this. We ventured to the stables, a sturdy structure a short walk from the manor, where the estate's horses snorted softly in their stalls. The path was indeed gritty, with a mix of clay and small pebbles that matched the study's debris. Poirot knelt, examining the ground. Footprints, Hastings faint, but present. A man's shoe, size 10 perhaps, and another, smaller, perhaps a woman's. They lead to the side door. I felt a surge of excitement. So someone entered from outside, or wished us to think so. Poirot cautioned. The side door was locked, Jenkins said. Yet the mud suggests movement, a contradiction, none. Back in the study, Poirot's attention shifted to the brandy glass, now awaiting lab analysis. He peered at it closely, noting the smudge he'd observed before. This cloth market is deliberate, not a casual wipe, but a careful one. And see here, he pointed to a tiny speck on the rim, barely visible. A residue, perhaps. Not brandy, I think. Poison, I ventured, my mind racing. Possibly, or a sedative. To dull Sir Reginald's senses before the fatal blow. The lab will tell us. Grayson, joining us, was skeptical. You're chasing shadows, Poirot. The stab wound killed him. Plain as day. Plain, yes, Poirot replied, but not simple. The cigar, the mud, the glass, they are pieces of a puzzle. And this, he picked up a small object from the desk, overlooked until now, a single pearl, no larger than a pea, nestled among the papers, a curious item, none, from a necklace, perhaps. I gasped. Lady Evelyn's pearls. She was toying with them at tea on the first day. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Indeed. Let us inquire. We summoned Lady Evelyn to the library, where she sat, pale and composed, though her hands trembled slightly. Madam, Poirot said, holding up the pearl in a gloved hand. This was found on your husband's desk. It is yours, I presume. Her eyes widened, and she touched her throat instinctively, where the pearls were absent. Yes, it must be. My necklace broke yesterday morning. I thought I'd collected all the pearls, but one must have fallen. In the study, Poirot pressed gently. I was there briefly, before breakfast, to fetch a book. I didn't notice it then. Poirot nodded, pocketing the pearl. Merci, madam. We shall return it to you. As she left, I whispered, she's lying, isn't she? She wasn't in the study yesterday morning. Perhaps, Poirot said. Or perhaps the pearl was placed there a clue to convenient, like Langford's ledger. Another red herring, or a thread to follow. The day progressed with further interviews, each revealing a new layer of complexity. Clara Beaumont admitted to sneaking a cigarette in the garden at 11:30, claiming she saw no one near the side door. Dr. Thorne pressed about his medical bag, revealed it contained sedatives strong enough to incapacitate, though he swore none were missing. Langford, increasingly agitated, insisted the ledger discrepancies were Sir Reginald's doing, hinting at secret dealings with foreign partners. Mrs. Hargrove, when questioned about the pearl, denied any knowledge, but her eyes lingered on Lady Evelyn during the group discussion. Poirot's focus on the pearl intrigued me. It's just a trinket, surely, I said as we paused for tea. Non, Hastings. A pearl is a simpler thing of beauty, but born of irritation. It is out of place, and thus it speaks. Was it dropped by accident, or planted to mislead? Grayson, overhearing, scoffed. You're making mountains out of molehills. Langford's prince may yet turn up on that glass. Poirot smiled enigmatically. The prince, the pearl, the mud, all are threads. But one detail, the cigar, I think begins Too glow. Sir Reginald smoked it, yet left it burning. Why? Because he was surprised, distracted. By whom? As evening approached, Poirot requested a map of the manor's layout, which Jenkins provided. He traced the corridors, noting the proximity of Lady Evelyn's room to the study, the side door's access to the stables, and the drawing room where Clara had lingered. The geography of a crime, Hastings, he said, is as vital as its psychology. Someone moved through these halls, unseen, unheard, or so they thought. Dinner was a tense affair, with Grayson announcing that Langford would be taken to the station for formal questioning tomorrow unless new evidence emerged. Langford's face darkened, and he excused himself early. Lady Evelyn retired soon after, claiming exhaustion, while Clara whispered to Dr. Thorne, who nodded gravely. Mrs. Hargrove watched all with her hawk-like gaze, and I felt the weight of Poirot's words. A larger tapestry, perhaps a network of deceit, was at play. Before retiring, Poirot confided in me. Tomorrow, mon ami, we shall test a theory. The cigar, the pearl, the mud, they point not to one crime, but to a web. Sir Reginald's death is but the first thread to unravel. I lay awake that night. The manor's silence oppressive, the pearl, so small, so innocuous, seemed to gleam. In my mind's eye, a clue that might yet crumble the edifice of lies surrounding us. Chapter 7. More lies surface. Eve. 4th day at Blackwood Manor broke with a sullen sky. The mist of the previous morning giving way to a drizzle that pattered against the windows. Like the tapping of impatient fingers, the atmosphere within the manor had grown stifling, each guest a prisoner of suspicion. Their movements watched by Inspector Grayson's men, and, more keenly, by Hercule Poirot's unrelenting gaze. The announcement that Victor Langford would face formal questioning at the police station had cast a pall over the household, and I sensed that the delicate balance of civility was fraying, revealing glimpses of the raw motives beneath. Poirot, as was his custom, began the day with meticulous routine. His breakfast tray arranged with geometric precision in the conservatory. I joined him there, noting the faint frown creasing his brow as he sipped his chocolate. "Hastings," he said, setting down his cup, "we approach a critical moment. The lies. They multiply like shadows in a storm. Today, we must provoke gently, but firmly to see what breaks free." I nodded, my mind still reeling from the clues we'd uncovered. The half-smoked cigar, the pearl, the mud from the stable path. "Langford's in a tight spot," I ventured. "If he's innocent, why is he so cagey about the ledger?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Cagey? Yes, but not necessarily guilty. The ledger points to him, but so do many fingers. We must look where others do not." He rose, smoothing his waistcoat. "Come, mon ami, let us stir the waters." Inspector Grayson had sat up in the library again, his notebook now filled with scribbled timelines and alibis. He greeted us with a curt nod, his patience with Poirot's methods wearing thin. "The lab results are in," he announced, waving a telegram. The brandy glass had traces of a sedative chloral hydrate, enough to knock a man out. No poison, but it confirms someone tampered with Sir Reginald's drink. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Chloral hydrate. you say? Interesting. And the source? Dr. Thorne's bag, Grayson replied, his tone triumphant. He admitted to carrying it. I'm bringing him in for questioning alongside Langford. I glanced at Poirot, expecting a protest, but he merely nodded. A prudent move, Inspector. But let us speak with the household first. The sedative, it changes the picture. We gathered the guests in the drawing room, where the fire crackled, fitfully, doing little to dispel the chill. Lady Evelyn sat with her hands clasped, her face a mask of controlled grief. Clara Beaumont, her usual vivacity dimmed, chewed her lip nervously. Dr. Thorne adjusted his spectacles repeatedly, his discomfort palpable. Langford stood by the window, his back rigid, while Mrs. Hargrove occupied her usual armchair, her eyes sharp as ever. Jenkins hovered near the door, his presence a silent reminder of the Manor's routines. Poirot began with his characteristic calm, holding up the telegram for all to see. Mesdames et messieurs, a development. The brandy glass in Sir Reginald's study contained chloral hydrate, a sedative, administered before his death. This suggests the killer wished him incapacitated before the fatal blow. Who among you had access to such a drug? All eyes turned to Dr. Thorne, who flushed crimson. I've told you. My medical bag contains chloral hydrate. It's common for treating insomnia, but I keep it locked, and I dispensed none that night. Poirot's gaze was steady. Yet Mademoiselle Beaumont saw you near the study with your bag at 11. Could someone have accessed it? Thorne shook his head vehemently. Impossible. The lock is secure. And I checked it this morning. No vials are missing. Clara interjected, her voice trembling. I didn't see him open the bag, Monsieur Poirot. He was just passing by. Poirot nodded, turning to Lady Evelyn. Madam, you took a sedative that night, prescribed by Dr. Thorne. Was it chloral hydrate? She hesitated, her fingers tightening on her handkerchief. I believe so. It's what he usually gives me. But I took it at 10, long before anything happened. And your pearls, Poirot continued smoothly, producing the single pearl from his pocket. This was found on the desk. You said your necklace broke yesterday morning. Yet no one saw you in the study then. Can you explain? Her eyes darted to the pearl, then away. I must have been mistaken about the time. Perhaps it was the evening before, when I spoke to Reginald about household matters. A lie, I thought, and Poirot's raised eyebrow confirmed he thought so too. He turned to Langford. Monsieur, the ledger suggests financial irregularities. Sir Reginald suspected embezzlement. Did he confront you that night? Langford's jaw tightened. He mentioned concerns. Yes, but I told him the truth. I had no part in it. He was looking into the Dutch firm, said they might be involved in unsavory dealings. Unsavory? Poirot's voice sharpened. Smuggling, perhaps, or worse. Langford hesitated, then nodded. He suspected they were using our ships for contraband. He wanted to pull out of the deal. A murmur rippled through the room. Mrs. Hargrove spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. Reginald told me the same. A week ago, he feared the company's reputation and my investments would suffer. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And you, Madame Hargrove, Heard a creak at one .m. From your room above the study, you say. Could it have been the side door, near the stables? She frowned, considering. Possibly. It was faint, but distinct. I thought little of it at the time. Grayson, growing impatient, interrupted. This is all well and good, Poirot, but the sedative points to Thorn and the ledger to Langford. We've got our men. Poirot raised a hand. Not yet, Inspector. The sedative, the pearl. The mud, these are not isolated. They connect to a larger truth. Let us examine the side door once more. We adjourned to the side door near the stables, where the gritty path lay under a thin layer of drizzle. Poirot knelt, his umbrella shielding him as he studied the ground. The footprints are faded now, but see here, a man's shoe, and there, a smaller print. And this, he pointed to a tiny scrap of fabric caught on a splinter in the doorframe. Barely visible. Blue silk, I think. From a dress, perhaps. I recalled Lady Evelyn's blue silk gown from the first evening, but said nothing, knowing Poirot would pursue the clue himself. Grayson bagged the fabric for analysis, grumbling about fancy detective work. Back in the library, Poirot confided in me. Hastings, the lies surface like bubbles in a pond. Lady Evelyn's pearl. Thorn's sedative, Langford's ledger-all. Point fingers, but too neatly. And the silk, it suggests a woman was near the door. Perhaps after Clara's cigarette break. But why? I shook my head, bewildered. To frame someone, or to cover their tracks? Both, perhaps. Poirot said, the chloral hydrate, it changes the crime. Sir Reginald was drugged, then stabbed. Why both? To ensure silence, or to stage a scene? As evening fell, the household gathered for another strained dinner. Langford's impending detention hung over the table, and Dr. Thorne's discomfort was palpable. Clara whispered to Lady Evelyn, who barely responded, her eyes distant. Mrs. Hargrove watched all with her unyielding gaze, and I wondered what secrets she harbored. Before retiring, Poirot drew me aside. Tomorrow, Mon ami, we press harder. The silk, the cigar, the sedative, they form a pattern. Someone weaves a clever web, but Hercule Poirot sees the threads. I retired to my room. The drizzle outside a soft counterpoint to my racing thoughts. The lies were piling up, but Poirot's relentless logic was closing in, and I sensed the truth was nearer than ever. Chapter 8. The emotional turning point. Fifth day at Blackwood Manor brought a restless energy, as if the relentless drizzle outside had seeped into the souls of its inhabitants, stirring emotions long held in check. The household, now confined, for days under the shadow of Sir Reginald Ashcroft's murder, was fraying at the edges. Suspicion had woven itself into every glance, every word, and the strain was palpable in the taut silences and sharp retorts that marked the morning's interactions. Inspector Grayson's determination to detain Victor Langford and Dr. Thorne had only heightened the tension, and I sensed that the delicate veneer of civility was about to crack. Hercule Poirot, ever the calm centre in this storm, had spent the morning in quiet contemplation in the library, his small leather notebook filled with cryptic annotations. I found him there, standing by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, gazing out at the rain-slicked lawns. "Hastings," he said without turning, "today we push the heart as well as the mind. The truth, it hides not only in facts, but in feelings. Someone will break, and in that breaking, we shall find a key." I nodded, though I was uncertain how he planned to provoke such a revelation. "Langford and Thorn are under pressure," I said. "Grayson's ready to hold them off." "Will that force someone's hand?" Poirot turned, his green eyes sharp. "Perhaps," moaned Orme, "but it is not always the accused who reveal the most. The guilty, they guard their secrets, but the innocent or those who know may falter under the weight of guilt or fear. We must watch closely." The morning's inquiries began in the drawing-room, where the fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the assembled guests. Lady Evelyn sat with her hands folded, her composure brittle as glass. Clara Beaumont, her eyes red from sleeplessness, clutched a cup of tea as if it were an anchor. Dr. Thorne's usual warmth was replaced by a nervous agitation, his fingers tapping his spectacles. Langford, pale and defiant, stood apart, while Mrs. Hargrove maintained her stoic vigil, her gaze as piercing as ever. Jenkins, ever present, stood by the door, his expression unreadable. Poirot began with a disarming gentleness, his voice soft yet commanding attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "we have uncovered much. The sedative in the brandy, the pearl on the desk, the mud from the stable path, the silk at the side door. These are not mere objects, they are threads in a tapestry of deceit. But deceit requires trust, and trust, when betrayed, wounds deeply. Who among you feels that wound?" A heavy silence followed. Lady Evelyn's lips trembled, and she looked away, her fingers tightening on her handkerchief. Clara glanced at her aunt, then quickly down at her tea. Thorne cleared his throat, but said nothing. Langford's jaw clenched, and Mrs. Hargrove's eyes narrowed slightly, as if measuring Poirot's intent. Poirot turned to Clara, his tone almost paternal. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, you are young, with a heart full of dreams. Yet you carry a burden, your uncle's disapproval of your theatrical ambitions. Did it cut deeply?" Clara's cup rattled in its saucer. He thought it frivolous," she said, her voice breaking. "We argued the day before he died. I told him I'd leave, make my own way in London. He said I'd bring shame to the family." Her voice rose, and tears spilled over. "But I didn't hate him, Monsieur Poirot. I loved him, even when he was cruel." Lady Evelyn reached for her niece's hand, but Clara pulled away, sobbing. "Clara, dear, you mustn't," Lady Evelyn began, but her own voice cracked, and she pressed her handkerchief to her mouth. Poirot seized the moment, turning to her. "Madam Ashcroft, your niece's pain echoes your own, does it not? A marriage of distance, a husband consumed by business, a life confined to this manor. Did you, too, feel the sting of betrayal?" Lady Evelyn's eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she would collapse. "Betrayal," she whispered. "Reginald was not always kind. He promised me a life in London, but it was always next year. And then, the letters." The room stilled. Grayson leaned forward, his pencil poised. Letters? Poirot prompted gently. Lady Evelyn's hands shook. I found them in his desk weeks ago. From a woman in Amsterdam. Intimate, suggesting an affair. I confronted him, and he laughed it off, said it was business. But I didn't believe him. A gasp escaped Clara, and Langford's head snapped up. Amsterdam, he said sharply. The Dutch firm. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Precisement. Monsieur Langford, the firm you championed. Did Sir Reginald's suspicions of their unsavoury dealings include personal entanglements? Langford's face reddened. I knew nothing of any affair. The firm was legitimate, profitable. Reginald was paranoid, seeing threats everywhere. Mrs. Hargrove spoke, her voice cold. Paranoid or perceptive? He told me the firm was a front for smuggling opium. Perhaps. My investments were tied to it, and he feared exposure would ruin us all. Dr. Thorne, silent until now, burst out. This is madness. Reginald was healthy, not paranoid. I'd have known if he was under such strain. But he hesitated, glancing at Lady Evelyn. He did ask me about sedatives a month ago. Said he wasn't sleeping. I gave him a small supply chloral hydrate. Grayson's eyes narrowed. You never mentioned this. Thorne flushed. It slipped my mind. It was routine, a few doses. He kept them in his study. Poirot's moustache twitched. In the study, you say? Yet the glass contained chloral hydrate, and your bag held the same. A coincidence. Dr. Thorne stammered. I swear, I didn't administer it that night. The room erupted in murmurs, accusations flying. Clara sobbed. Aunt Evelyn, did you know about the letters? Lady Evelyn shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Langford snapped. This is a witch hunt. While Mrs. Hargrove remained silent, her gaze fixed on Poirot, Poirot raised a hand, restoring order. Enough. The truth begins to surface, like a ship emerging from fog. Madam Ashcroft, these letters, where are they now? She hesitated, then whispered, I burned them. I couldn't bear the shame. Poirot nodded, unsurprised. A pity, but understandable. And you, Doctor, your sedatives, were they locked away, or accessible to others? Thorne swallowed. In a drawer in the study. I assumed he'd keep it secure. Grayson stood, exasperated. This changes everything. The sedative was in the study, accessible to anyone. Langford, Thorne, you're both coming with me. Poirot intervened, his voice calm but firm. Not yet, Inspector. The emotional truth has broken through, but the facts require one more step. Let us examine the study drawer. We moved to the study, Grayson muttering about delays. The drawer in question was unlocked, containing a small vial of chloral hydrate, half empty. Poirot examined it, noting a faint smudge on the glass similar to the one on the brandy tumbler. Another wipe with a cloth, he murmured. The same hand, perhaps, back in the library. Poirot confided in me. Hastings, the letters, the sedative, they reveal not just motive, but opportunity. Lady Evelyn's pain, Clara's anger, Thorne's oversight, Langford's denials, Hargrove's suspicions, they intertwine. But the silk at the door, the cigars ash, these hold the key. Dinner that evening was nearly unbearable. the air thick with unspoken accusations. Lady Evelyn retired early, Clara trailing her like a lost child. Thorn and Langford exchanged heated glances, while Mrs. Hargrove's silence felt ominous. Grayson, stationed at the manor, watched them all like a hawk dot as night fell. Poirot drew me aside. Tomorrow, Mon ami, we set the trap. The emotional cracks have widened. Now we apply pressure. The truth is close, Hastings, very close. I retired, my heart heavy with the day's revelations. The manor's walls seemed to close in, and I wondered who would break necks under Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth. Chapter 9. The trap. Sixth day at Blackwood Manor dawned with a deceptive calm. The drizzle of the previous days giving way to a pale sun that cast long shadows across the estate. The tension within the manor, however, had reached a fever pitch. The emotional outbursts of the previous day, Lady Evelyn's revelation of the letters, Clara's tearful confession, Dr. Thorne's admission about the sedatives had cracked the facade of propriety, leaving the household raw and exposed. Inspector Grayson, emboldened by these developments, was preparing to escort Victor Langford and Dr. Thorne to the station for formal questioning, convinced that one or both held the key to Sir Reginald Ashcroft's murder. But Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct for the hidden, had other plans. I found Poirot in the conservatory, his small frame silhouetted against the glass, his hands busy arranging a tray of pastries with geometric precision. "Hastings," he said, his voice vibrant with purpose, "today we set the trap. The threads pearl, silk, cigar. Sedative they converge. The guilty one grows nervous, and nervousness betrays. We shall gather all in the drawing-room and apply the pressure. Subtle, but relentless." I frowned, still grappling with the tangled web of clues. "A trap? You mean to provoke the killer into revealing themselves?" "Precisement," Poirot replied, his green eyes gleaming. "The guilty mind is like a tightly wound spring one push, and it uncoils. We shall use the truth, or the illusion of it, to draw them out." Inspector Grayson joined us shortly after, his expression one of barely concealed frustration. "I hope this trap of yours works, Poirot," he said, adjusting his hat. "I've got orders to wrap this up. Langford and Thorne are packing their bags for the station unless you've got something concrete." Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Patience, Inspector. The concrete, it forms as we speak. Assemble the household at 11 o'clock in the drawing room. Hercule Poirot will demonstrate how the little grey cells triumph. The drawing room, with its fading roses and flickering fire, was a fitting stage for Poirot's gambit. The guests assembled with varying degrees of reluctance. Lady Evelyn, pale and withdrawn, her hands clasped tightly. Clara Beaumont, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Thorne, his spectacles fogging with anxiety. Victor Langford, his face a mask of defiance, and Mrs. Hargrove, as composed as ever, her gaze unyielding. Jenkins stood by the door, his presence a quiet constant, while Grayson and his constable flanked the room. Ready to act, Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small stature commanding the room's attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured. "A crime has been committed, a murder most cunning, woven with lies and misdirection. But Hercule Poirot sees through the fog. Let us reconstruct the night of Sir Reginald's death, step by step, and watch the truth emerge. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Sir Reginald retired to his study at midnight, locking the door, as Monsieur Langford and Jenkins confirm. Yet the door was found ajar at 8 by Madame Hargrove. The windows were latched, the room sealed. How, then, did the killer enter? Grayson shifted impatiently, but Poirot continued. The brandy glass contained chloral hydrate, enough to render Sir Reginald drowsy, perhaps unconscious. This suggests premeditation. The killer wished him helpless before the fatal stab with the letter opener. But why the sedative? The wound alone was lethal. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. The clues, the pearl, the mud, the silk, the cigar, they tell a story. The pearl from Madame Ashcroft's necklace was found on the desk. She claims it fell when the necklace broke, yet no one saw her in the study that morning. The mud from the stable path suggests entry via the side door, yet Jenkins locked it at midnight. The silk, blue and delicate, caught on the doorframe perhaps from a dress, and the cigar, half-smoked, left burning. A man of habit does not abandon his cigar unless interrupted. Lady Evelyn's hands trembled, and Clara bit her lip. Thorn adjusted his spectacles, while Langford's scowl deepened. Mrs. Hargrove remained impassive, but her eyes never left Poirot. Now, Poirot said, his voice rising slightly, "Let us consider the motives." Sir Reginald suspected embezzlement, as the ledger shows funds siphoned to an unnamed account. Monsieur Langford, you were his partner, eager for the Dutch deal. Yet he suspected smuggling. Madame Hargrove, your investments were at risk, and you confronted him. Madame Ashcroft, you discovered letters suggesting an affair. A wound to your heart, Mademoiselle Beaumont. Your uncle's disapproval of your dreams led to bitter words. And Dr. Thorne, your sedatives were used, perhaps without your knowledge. The room was silent, the tension electric. Poirot produced the scrap of blue silk, holding it aloft. This silk, found at the side door, matches a gown worn by Madame Ashcroft on the first evening. Madam, did you venture to the stables that night? Lady Evelyn gasped, her face paling. No, I was in my room, asleep. Yet your light was on at 11, as Mademoiselle Beaumont noted. Poirot pressed. And the pearl, did you place it to mislead, or did it fall in a moment of panic? I told you, it broke, she cried, her voice breaking. I didn't kill him. Clara leapt to her feet. Stop it, you're torturing her. Aunt Evelyn couldn't have done it, she loved him. Despite everything, Poirot's gaze softened. Mademoiselle, your loyalty is admirable. But someone in this room knows more than they say. The sedative accessible in the study, as Dr. Thorne admitted. Who took it? Who wiped the glass, leaving only a smudge? Thorne stammered. I swear, I didn't touch it that night. Langford snapped. This is a farce. You're grasping at straws. Poirot. Mrs. Hargrove spoke, her voice cutting through the chaos. Monsieur Poirot, you omit one detail. The creak I heard at 1 a.m. It was not the side door, but the floorboards outside my room. Someone moved in the corridor. Near the study, Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, madam. A vital piece. The trap is set, and the guilty one feels the pressure. Let us test one final theory." He turned to Jenkins. "Monsieur Jenkins, you locked the side door at midnight. Did you check it again before morning?" Jenkins hesitated, a rare crack in his composure. "No, sir. I assumed it remained locked." Poirot nodded, as if expecting this. "And the study key, Sir Reginald's only copy. Where is it now?" Grayson interjected. "Found in his pocket," as Jenkins said. Yet the door was ajar. Poirot mused. Someone had access. Someone who knew the Manor's routines, its secrets. He turned to the group, his voice suddenly sharp. "I propose a reconstruction. Tonight, at midnight, we shall reenact Sir Reginald's final moments. Each of you will take your place as on the night of the murder. The killer will falter, for the truth cannot hide when the scene is relived." Gasps and protests erupted. Grayson, skeptical but intrigued, agreed. "If it gets us answers, I'm game. But no tricks, Poirot." As the group dispersed, Poirot confided in me. "Hastings, the trap is psychological. The guilty one will fear exposure, make a mistake. The silk, the creak, the cigar, they point to a plan, not a moment of passion. And the smuggling. It is the key to the larger network." Dinner was a grim affair, the prospect of the reenactment looming over all. Lady Evelyn barely ate. Clara clung to her side. Thorne and Langford exchanged wary glances, and Mrs. Hargrave's silence was a presence. In itself, I felt the weight of Poirot's plan, knowing that tonight the truth would be forced into the open, or so I hoped. Chapter 10. The reveal night of the 6th day. At Blackwood Manor was cloaked in an oppressive stillness. The pale sun of the morning long vanished behind a shroud of clouds. The household, gripped by the anticipation of her cue Poirot's promised reenactment, moved through dinner with the mechanical motions of actors awaiting a dreaded cue. The dining room, once a place of conviviality, now felt like a stage set for a final act. The crystal chandeliers casting stark shadows across the strained faces of the guests. Inspector Grayson, his skepticism tempered by curiosity, had agreed to Poirot's plan, stationing his constable at the Manor's exits to ensure no one fled. I, too, felt the weight of the moment. My nerves taut as I awaited the unraveling of the mystery that had consumed us. Poirot, immaculate in his evening suit, his mustache gleaming under the lamplight, gathered us in the drawing room at 11:30. The fire burned low, its embers casting a faint glow over the assembled. Lady Evelyn, her face pale and drawn. Clara Beaumont, clutching her aunt's arm. Dr. Thorne, his spectacles reflecting the firelight. Victor Langford, his defiance now tinged with desperation, and Mrs. Hargrave, her eyes as sharp as ever. Jenkins stood by the door, his usual composure, fraying slightly, while Grayson and his constable loomed in the background. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonant with authority. "Tonight, we recreate the night of Sir Reginald Ashcroft's murder. Each of you will take your place as you were at midnight, and we shall see what the truth reveals. The clues, the pearl, the silk, the cigar, the sedative have spoken, and Hercule Poirot has listened. The killer is among us, and their mask. We'll fall. A murmur of unease rippled through the room, but Poirot raised a hand for silence. Let us begin, Monsieur Langford. You will proceed to the library, as you did after dinner. Madame Ashcroft, to your room. Mademoiselle Beaumont, to the drawing-room. Dr. Thorne, to the corridor near the study. Madame Hargrove, to your room. Above, Monsieur Jenkins, you will lock the side door, then retire. Inspector Grayson and Hastings, you will observe with me. The group dispersed reluctantly, each moving to their assigned position. I followed Poirot to the study, where a constable stood guard. The room was as it had been, save for the absence of Sir Reginald's body. The brandy glass, now analyzed, sat on the desk, alongside the ledger and the ashtray with its half-smoked cigar. Poirot had arranged for a Standiner servant dressed in Sir Reginald's coat to sit at the desk, simulating the victim's posture. At midnight precisely, Jenkins reported locking the side door, his footsteps echoing as he retreated. Lady Evelyn's door closed upstairs. Clara's soft humming drifted from the drawing-room, and Dr. Thorne's heavy tread sounded in the corridor. Mrs. Hargreaves' room was silent, but Poirot had instructed her to listen for the creak she'd heard. Langford, in the library, paced audibly. Poirot, standing near the study door, whispered to me, "Watch Hastings. The killer expects scrutiny, but not precision. The creak, the silk they will betray." Minutes ticked by, the Manor's silence broken only by the ticking of the study clock. At 1 a.m., a faint creak sounded not from the side door, but from the corridor above. Near Mrs. Hargreaves' room, Poirot's eyes gleamed. As I suspected, he murmured. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corridor, a figure, cloaked in darkness, creeping toward the study. Grayson tensed, but Poirot signaled for silence. The figure hesitated, then slipped back into the shadows as Clara's humming grew louder. As if she'd sensed something amiss, Poirot clapped his hands, summoning all to the study. The guests filed in, their faces a mix of confusion and fear. Jenkins, recalled from his quarters, looked startled. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot declared, "the reenactment is complete." The creak, heard again, was not the side door, but the floorboards above, and the shadow it was no ghost. The killer moved tonight, as they did then, to ensure their secret remained buried. He turned to Jenkins, his voice sharp. "Monsieur Jenkins, you locked the side door, yet the silk was found there. You neglected to mention you have a key to the study, kept in the butler's pantry for emergencies. Did you use it that night?" Jenkins paled, his hands trembling. "I never used it, sir. It's locked away, yet the door was ajar," Poirot said, "and the silk blue, like Madame Ashcroft's gown, but also like the scarf you wear for evening duties. A scarf missing since that night." Gasps filled the room. Lady Evelyn cried out. "Jenkins, impossible." Poirot continued, relentless. "The cigar, half-smoked, shows Sir Reginald was interrupted. The sedative, taken from the study drawer, dulled his senses, the pearl placed to implicate Madame Ashcroft. The mud, tracked deliberately from the stables to suggest an outsider. But you, Jenkins, knew the Manor's routines. You heard Sir Reginald's suspicions of smuggling a network you facilitated through the shipping company. Jenkins staggered, his composure crumbling. No, I served Sir Reginald faithfully. Then explain the ledger, Poirot pressed, holding up a page, a coded entry, overlooked by all but me. It lists shipments not of goods, but of opium routed through Amsterdam. You, Jenkins, handled the manifests, ensuring they passed unnoticed. Sir Reginald discovered this, confronted you that night. You drugged his brandy, stabbed him with the letter opener, and staged this scene to point to others. Clara sobbed, Jenkins. But why? Poirot's voice softened. For money, mademoiselle. The smuggling network promised wealth, but Sir Reginald's withdrawal threatened all. You, Jenkins, acted to protect your gains, using your access, your knowledge, to kill silently. Jenkins collapsed to his knees, his face ashen. I didn't mean to. He was going to ruin everything. Grayson sprang forward, handcuffs at the ready. That's enough, Jenkins. You're under arrest. As Jenkins was led away, the room erupted in shocked whispers. Lady Evelyn wept. Clara comforted her, and Langford and Thorne exchanged stunned glances. Mrs. Hargrove nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion. Poirot turned to me, his expression grave. The trap, Hastings, was not just the reenactment, but the pressure of truth. Jenkins faltered. As the guilty always do, Grayson, begrudgingly impressed, shook Poirot's hand. You've done it again, Poirot. But how did you know? The little grey cells, Poirot said simply. The cigar showed interruption. The silk was too deliberate. The creak misplaced. Jenkins alone could move unseen, with access to all. As the household dispersed, the weight of the revelation settled. Over us, the Manor, once a haven, now bore the stain of betrayal, its secrets laid bare by Poirot's relentless logic. Chapter 11. The unraveling wet dawn of the seventh day at Blackwood Manor brought a fragile clarity, as if the Manor itself exhaled after the storm of Jenkins' confession. The clouds had parted, revealing a crisp blue sky, but the air within. The house remained heavy with the aftershocks of betrayal. Jenkins, now in custody at the village station, had left a void in the household's rhythm, his absence a stark reminder of the treachery that had lurked beneath his impeccable service. The guests, though relieved by the resolution, were subdued, grappling with the revelation that the butler, a man trusted implicitly, had orchestrated Sir Reginald Ashcroft's murder to protect a smuggling network. Hercule Poirot, ever composed, took his morning chocolate in the library, his small figure a beacon of order amidst the chaos. I joined him, still reeling from the previous night's drama. Poirot, I said, settling into a chair, you've done it again. Jenkins the last person I'd have suspected. But this smuggling network, how deep does it go? Poirot's eyes gleamed as he set down his cup. Mon ami, the murder was but the tip of the iceberg. Jenkins was a thread in a larger web, one that stretches beyond this manor to the ports of Amsterdam and beyond. The little grey cells. They do not rest yet. There is more to uncover. Inspector Grayson arrived shortly after, his demeanour a mix of grudging respect and lingering frustration. "You've got your man, Poirot," he said, tossing his hat onto a table. Jenkins confessed, fully admitted to slipping the chloral hydrate into Sir Reginald's brandy and stabbing him when he began asking questions about the coded ledger entries. Said he panicked, tried to frame Lady Evelyn with the pearl and the silk. "But this smuggling business opium, you said, that's above my pay grade." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "The smuggling, Inspector, is the heart of the matter. Sir Reginald's shipping company was a conduit, and Jenkins ensured the manifests concealed the truth. But he did not act alone. There are others partners in Amsterdam, perhaps even in this household." Grayson's eyes widened. "You think there's more to it? Langford, maybe?" He pushed that Dutch deal hard. "Possibly," Poirot said. "But we must proceed with care. Let us speak with the household once more, to tie the final threads." We gathered in the drawing-room, where the fire burned brighter today, as if reflecting the lifting of the Manor's gloom. Lady Evelyn sat with a new-found resolve, her grief tempered by relief. Clara, clinging to her aunt, seemed less fragile, her eyes brighter. Dr. Thorne, his professional calm restored, adjusted his spectacles thoughtfully. Victor Langford, no longer facing detention, stood with a cautious optimism, while Mrs. Hargreaves' gaze remained sharp, as if she sensed the inquiry was not yet over. A new butler, hastily summoned from the village, served tea with less finesse than Jenkins, but adequate efficiency. Poirot stood before the group, his presence commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the murder of Sir Reginald has been solved, but the crime is not singular. Jenkins acted to protect a smuggling operation opium, hidden in the shipments of Ashcroft's company. He drugged and killed to silence suspicion. But who else knew of this network?" A tense silence fell. Langford cleared his throat. "I swear, Poirot, I knew nothing of opium. The Dutch deal was about textiles, or so I thought. Reginald's suspicions caught me off guard." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Yet you were eager for the deal, Monsieur Langford. Did you never question the profits?" So unusually high, Langford flushed. "I trusted Reginald's judgment. If there was smuggling, it was hidden from me. Double quotes Mrs. Hargrove spoke, her voice cold, hidden, perhaps, but not from all. My investments were tied to those shipments. Reginald warned me of irregularities, but I thought it was mismanagement, not crime." Poirot turned to her. "Madam, you confronted Sir Reginald about your losses. Did you suspect a deeper wrong?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I suspected fraud, yes, but opium, no. I would have reported it." Lady Evelyn, her voice soft but firm, added, "Reginald was worried. The last few weeks, he said the company was in danger, not just financially. I thought it was the letters, the woman in Amsterdam. But perhaps she was part of this network." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A possibility, madam. The letters you burned did. They mentioned shipments, or names." She shook her head. "They were personal, or so I thought. I couldn't bear to read them closely." Dr. Thorne interjected, if I may, Poirot. As the family doctor, I saw no signs of this criminal activity. Reginald's stress was clear, but he never confided specifics. Poirot nodded, pacing slowly. The network. It is clever hidden in plain sight. Jenkins was the linchpin here. But in Amsterdam, there are others. The ledger's coded entries, VL, to confirm transfer, may not refer to Victor Langford, but to another. Inspector, I recommend you contact the authorities in Amsterdam. The shipping manifests must be examined. Grayson jotted a note. His skepticism replaced by determination. I'll cable them today. If there's a network, we'll root it out. Poirot turned to me, his voice low. Hastings, the pearl, the silk, they were Jenkins' misdirection. But the cigar, the sedative, they betrayed him. His mistake was underestimating the little grey cells. As the group dispersed, I lingered with Poirot in the library. So, it's over? I asked. Jenkins is caught. The murder solved. Poirot shook his head. The murder, yes. But the web. It extends beyond our reach, for now. The Dutch authorities will pursue the smuggling. But here, justice is served. Sir Reginald's death is avenged. We prepared to depart Blackwood Manor the next day, our bags packed, the household slowly returning to a semblance of normalcy. Lady Evelyn thanked Poirot with quiet dignity. Clara hugged him impulsively, and even Langford offered a grudging handshake. Mrs. Hargrove, ever enigmatic, merely nodded, her eyes suggesting she knew more than she'd revealed. As we boarded the train back to London, I reflected on the case. Poirot, I said, it was the cigar, wasn't it? The one trace that crumbled Jenkins for sod. He smiled, adjusting his hat. The cigar, yes, but also the order, Hastings. The mind seeks symmetry, and in its absence, the truth emerges. Jenkins disrupted that order, and so he fell. The manor faded into the distance, its secrets exposed. But I knew the larger web of crime would haunt Poirot's thoughts, a challenge for another day. Chapter 12. A shadow Lingers train to London clattered rhythmically through the Devonshire countryside, its steady pulse a stark contrast to the turmoil we had left behind at Blackwood Manor. The case of Sir Reginald Ashcroft's murder was solved, Jenkins' confession secured, and justice, at least in part, served. Yet, as I sat opposite Hercule Poirot in our compartment, his immaculate figure framed against the window's passing scenery, I sensed an undercurrent of unease in his demeanor. His green eyes, usually so sharp, were clouded with a rare pensiveness, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. Poirot, I ventured, adjusting my hat. You seem troubled. Jenkins is in custody. The murder pinned on him. Surely that's a victory. Poirot sighed. A rare sound from a man so composed. A victory? Yes, Hastings, but incomplete. The murder is solved, the killer caught, but the web, the smuggling network, it stretches far beyond our grasp. The little grey cells, they are restless. There is a shadow that lingers, a piece yet to be placed. I frowned, puzzled. You mean the Dutch connection? Grayson's contacting Amsterdam. They'll handle the smuggling ring, won't they? Perhaps. Poirot said, his voice low. But in matters of crime, Hastings, there is always a mastermind, a spider at the center. Jenkins was a thread, a vital one, but not the weaver. Who in Amsterdam pulled the strings? And who else in Blackwood Manor knew more than they revealed? His words sent a chill through me, and I glanced out at the rolling fields, now tinged with the golden hues of late summer. The manor, with its secrets and betrayals, seemed a world away. Yet its shadow clung to us upon arriving in London. Poirot insisted we visit his office in Whitehaven Mansions to review his notes. The familiar clutter of his desk papers meticulously arranged. A silver inkstand gleaming offered a comforting contrast to the chaos of the past week. He spread out the ledger pages, copied by Grayson's men before our departure, and pointed to the coded entries. "See here, Hastings," he said, tracing a line. "VL to confirm transfer by 15th. We assumed Victor Langford. But what if VL is another Van Leyden, perhaps a name common in Dutch circles?" I nodded, catching his drift, a contact in the smuggling ring, exactament. "And the letters Lady Evelyn burned personal," she said, "but perhaps coded messages, disguised as affection. We must cable Grayson to inquire further." We sent the cable, urging the inspector to press Jenkins on his Amsterdam contacts and to share any findings from the Dutch authorities. Poirot then turned to a small envelope containing the blue silk scrap from the side door. "This," he said, holding it up, "was Jenkins' attempt to implicate Lady Evelyn. But it raises a question. Why choose her? A personal grudge, or a deeper connection to the network?" I shook my head, bewildered. She seemed genuinely heartbroken. Those letters, she burned them out of shame, not guilt. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps, but shame can mask knowledge." And Mrs. Hargrove, her silence, a hawk-like gaze. She suspected fraud, yet did not act. Why? The question hung unanswered as we dined that evening at Simpson's, Poirot's mood lifting slightly with the prospect of a fine roast. Yet even there, he remained preoccupied, sketching timelines on a napkin. "The cigar, Hastings," he said between bites. It was the first clue, the interruption that betrayed Jenkins' presence. But the larger crime the opium trade requires more than a butler's cunning. Days passed, and a telegram from Grayson arrived, confirming that the Dutch authorities had raided a warehouse linked to Ashcroft's shipping company, uncovering crates of opium hidden among textile bales. A man named Van Leyden was detained, but he claimed ignorance of Jenkins, suggesting a compartmentalized network. As I thought, Poirot murmured, reading the message. Jenkins was a pawn, expendable. The true master remains hidden. We visited Scotland Yard to confer with Grayson, who had returned to London. The inspector, though pleased with the arrest, shared Poirot's frustration. "Van Leyden's a small fish," he said, tossing a file onto his desk. "He names no one. Higher up, the network's tight, someone's covering their tracks." Poirot nodded. "And in Blackwood Manor, someone else may know more. Madame Hargrove, perhaps. Whose investments were at stake? Or even Langford, whose eagerness for the deal blinds him to its true nature?" Grayson promised to pursue the leads, But Poirot's expression suggested he doubted a swift resolution. As we left, he confided Hastings. "This case is closed, yet open. The murder is solved, but the shadow of the network lingers. We have cut one thread, but the web endures." Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot filed his notes. His movements precise but heavy. "The pursuit of justice," he said, "is never truly finished. But for now, we rest. The little grey cells, they have earned it." I returned to my own lodgings, the case replaying in my mind. Blackwood Manor, with its grand halls and hidden sins, had been laid bare by Poirot's brilliance. Yet the larger crime loomed, a spectre beyond our reach, as I drifted to sleep. I wondered if the shadow would ever fully lift, or if, as Poirot feared, it would cast its web anew.